Hello, how are you today, everyone? We're so glad that you're here. So I've got a question for you. Is your niche market quite unique? Penelope Carlevato has refined a method that works very well for her, and she's going to share that with us today. Hi, I'm Patricia A Durgin, and this is Marketers on a Mission. We present marketing tutorials and interviews by and for Christian writers, speakers, and artists. This is episode number 189, How to Grow Your Audience and Sell More Books by Attending Others' Large Events, with my guest, Penelope Carlevato. Hello, Penelope. How are you? You've led quite an interesting life, and it started in an interesting way as well. Tell us about your birth and how you got over to South Dakota.
My mother was a war bride. She was teaching a boys' school in England, teaching music. She was a music teacher. Met my father in a pub near where he was stationed. I always want to romanticize that and say, oh, I'm sure they met in a tea room over a cup of Earl Grey. But they didn't. They met over a pint, probably in a pub. Anyway, after the war, I was just about a year old, and my mother and I came over on a ship that had been a troop ship, but it had been converted back. So it was a little rough, but very interesting trip across the ocean. Got there and then lived on a farm in South Dakota, grew up on a farm in South Dakota. My mother kept a very British home. I had a very nice British accent till I was about 7, and then went to school, no, then lost that. But I would love to have that British accent back today. Anyway, that's how I ended up in South Dakota.
And when you were young, you were on the fastest ship in the world going back to England for a visit, right?
Yeah, when I was about 8 years old, my parents, we went for 3 months back so my mother could visit all her relatives, and her father had just passed away. So I do not remember either my grandmother or my grandfather, but we were able to visit aunts and uncles and actually made some connections that we still have to. So that was amazing. That was many years ago. But we went on the SS United States. It was the fastest ocean liner at the time. It won the Blue Ribbon, which is for the fastest sailing across the Atlantic. Mm-hmm. That was an amazing, and that's kind of where I first heard about the Titanic. Because everybody's, how did you come? I have had people ask me, were you a passenger on the Titanic? At that point, I know they don't know what the years were of the Titanic, because I would probably be about 150. So that's when I first heard of the Titanic. And my mother and I were having tea on this beautiful ocean liner out in the middle of the ocean. And my mother said, this must have been like it was on the Titanic. And I, of course, said, what's the Titanic? And so she told me a little bit. But remember, it was primarily a British ship with British crew, a British captain, with a lot of money from America to build it. But it was rather of an embarrassment. It wasn't something that the English people wanted to talk about. So you didn't hear much about it. And actually the notoriety for it came from the unsinkable Molly Brown. I mean, that's kind of what brought it to the face, because she was on the Titanic. So a lot of that came to be in that time.
Let's go back to what you just said. I want to make sure I'm understanding you. Did the ship cause embarrassment to Britain, or the
ship?
The ship itself, before it sank and all of that?
It was a huge, everyone was all excited about it. It was the most luxurious ship ever built. Many rich and famous went on it. The richest man in the world, John Jacob Astor, went on it. So it was quite a phenomenal. But then nobody ever said that it was unsinkable. Nobody in the shipping business said it was unsinkable, but other people did. So everyone assumed, we don't have to worry about it. So yeah, it was. They were embarrassed because it sank, because it should not have.
Okay, now I'm understanding your point. Okay, thank you.
That's where the embarrassment came in. Right.
Yeah. Thanks for looping back to that.
Yeah.
While you were there on that trip, your mother got to take a picture of Queen Mary standing in front of a building in real life. Right. Now, that is pretty cool, Penelope.
Right. I forget about how amazing that really was. But we were a part of our trip for visiting Sandringham, which is one of the royal homes, and it's where most of the British families spend Christmas, where the Queen goes and everybody comes and they have a Christmas lunch and a Christmas tea. And so we were there, and there was a little carpentry shop where they were making all kinds of little furniture and chairs and things, and my mother wanted to see it. We were in this carpentry shop, and the manager came up and said, if you could come back about noon, the Queen is going to come and inspect this. But you have to be back here before 12 because we're going to shut it down. So we ran back to the hotel we were staying at, put on all our finery. Actually, my mother wore a dress that she had worn on the captain's dinner on the ship coming over. You got to eat with the captain at those times. But so we were all decked out. My father had on a suit. And my mother practiced us how to make a curtsy, how to bow, so we could be presentable to the Queen. Now, this was Queen Mary, the current Queen, Queen Elizabeth's grandmother. So she wasn't the reigning queen at that time, but she was very highly respected and had a lot of clout, let's say that. So we hurried back to the carpentry shop. When the manager, there was another couple there. So he had us in one corner, kind of in the back of the shop. And I think it was just supposed to be casual that we were there. She came in and almost made a beeline back to talk to us. And I think it was because the manager told her that we were Americans, but the lady had been English. So she came back there and started just talking and said, my son lives in America. Now, this was her son that had abdicated the throne to Mary Wallace Simpson. But she said, he lives in New York. How close are you to New York? Well, so my mother was chit-chatting with her, and then we were able to told us do or say anything unless the Queen actually looks at you or talks. So she did. She looked at us. So I remember I did my curtsy, said, how do you do? And I don't know, I think my brother did. I can remember just thinking, oh my goodness, this is kind of like meeting God, because she was in white. She had a white hat on. I should have got the picture out. I'm sorry I didn't, but dressed all in white. And we chit-chatted for a while. And so that was my visit with the Queen. I can say I've met the Queen. I have not had tea with the Queen. Anything. I did last summer. I did have Queen tea at Buckingham Palace when I went on a tour, and they have a cafe that looks out on the grounds in the back, kind of a little cafeteria where they serve tea and scones. And so I sat out there and just thought, oh, wouldn't it be lovely if one of the royal family came and just had a little cup of tea with me, but they didn't. So.
Well, you got to see Queen Mary, though. I mean, that was a big deal.
She was really delightful. She was very animated and very friendly. And my mother, I'm sure her heart was jumping out of her chest. She was just might have been. But they chatted quite a while. And when we got back home to South Dakota, we lived in a fairly small town. And that was not front page, but it was second page news. When you open it, there was a big picture of us and the Queen, that my mother asked her if she could take a picture of her, which I don't think that's protocol. I think that was probably very brave of my mother to say, may I take a picture of you? And she said, oh, yes, I'd be happy to. And so she went outside and stood in front of the carpentry shop. And it's just a brick wall in back of her. And here she is standing there very stately, doesn't smile, just stately. But my mother treasured that picture. I in a couple of my books, I think, too. But yeah, not often you get to have that original photo.
She was very impressive in lots of different ways, and so tall, and then wore those hats.
Right.
She's been quite a sight in real life. Let's see, we've got some comments and questions on Facebook. We've got Sharon Tedford here. I believe you know Sharon. It's always good to see you, Sharon, and Judy Morrow. She's joined. Sharon wants to know how many people can say they've had a photo and a chat with the Queen, just hanging out with royalty. When you grew up, you became a nurse. How did you go from being a nurse to being a tea expert to being an etiquette expert to being an author?
Oh boy, many hats, right? Wearing many hats. I knew when I was 5 that I wanted to be a nurse. That was just something I loved to, and reading. I love to read. I've read since I've been very little. My mother was a big reader. So, and then tea was just kind of a way of life. It wasn't anything extraordinary. If you came to our home, you were always offered a cup of tea. You never were not asked that. So that was just part of it. And then being a tea, I think, being a nurse, I always associate if you're sick, that's what you want to drink, right? Tea. If you're sick, you don't ever want somebody to bring you a cup of coffee. But the two just kind of went together, and I just had a desire to share. I can remember I wrote a lot of things. I've journaled pretty much all my life, and I don't know what I'm going to do with them when I'm gone. Who's going to read them? But it's just, that's the way I just feel like, it's speaking on paper. That's how you can just get things out, get your feelings out. So the nurse situation, being a nurse was, I think, having a servant's heart. To really enjoy nursing, to have a servant's heart. And I think my gift of hospitality, it took me a while to realize that's why I like to have people over all the time. We had kind of a front door, and my mother was like that too. We love people. So I think nurse. And then I had a friend who we decided that we should write a cookbook. She had written the cookbook, and we were going to go see how we could get it out there. And so we went to a class. But the very first thing that happened with wanting to write was the church I was going to. We did a mini retreat, just a one-day event where we had workshops. And the workshops were on kind of lifestyle evangelism. The ladies were asked, what do you like to do? And how can you use your gifts to share your faith with others? So it's just kind of working together, kind of hand in hand. And they asked me if I would do a class on how to do an afternoon tea. And I can remember saying to my mother, what am I going to talk about? And she said, well, I don't know. I think that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Who would ever want to know how to do tea? So that was kind of in the back of my head. So I didn't expect much from it. And as we were getting ready for it, I had 2 friends that I had made short, and the other one was going to help me with the tea, actually make tea. But I said, they can't drink tea out of paper cups. They can't drink tea out of plastic. We've got to come up with a way for everybody to have a teacup. We finally decided the best way, bring your own teacup. So everybody brought their own teacup, and we thought we'd probably have about, maybe 20, 25. Well, they called me a couple of days before the event and said, we're going to have to do 2 classes. There's over 100 women that have signed up to do this class. And I said, you've got to be kidding. So I called my friend Bev, says, make more shortbread and be prepared. You're going to be working hard that day. So the morning of, I took everything. I took my tea card, and I took tea lamps and a poster. So the little Sunday school room that I had it in, had them all shared. I think I put a little doily by each one. But it was amazing. And in that class, there was a lady who was in charge of she was the president of the Greater Los Angeles Bridal Consultants. She asked me if I would come and speak to her bridal consult meeting. Well, I was like, I've never done anything like that, so I wasn't quite sure, but I went. And as a result of that, I got some referrals to do some more speaking. And then the women's mission, women's director at our church asked if I would like to go to a symposium they were having. And at the symposium, I could take some classes, and she thought it would be good, help me if I wanted to speak, or writing wasn't even a question. That wasn't even part of it. So I went, and I took a class by a dear friend. A lot of you that are listening know Kathy Collard Miller. She has been an amazing encourager and a friend for a long time. But I was in her class, and we had an assignment. We had to write something. And I'm thinking, I just came to learn the speaking part. I do not want to know about the writing part. But we had to do it. It was an assignment. So I went home, and I wrote about a story about a patient that I'd had. And the patient, it was kind of a tearjerker, but I took it back, and she said, you really need to write. You really know how to express your feelings. So I took that as a word from the Lord and started working a little bit on taking some classes. And at the time, there was a group called CLASS, Christian Leaders and Speaker Services. And so I went to that. And then the writing just kind of came. I heard opportunities to write stories for different compilation books. So I have a lot of stories in many compilation books. And I still do that. If there's just a couple books that came out on the Titanic. And let's see, why Titanic Moments, this book, Yvonne Lehman, and I've written a couple stories for her and that. So, and every time your name gets out a little bit, maybe you all have a little byline so people hear about you. And with tea, tea is always intermingled in almost everything that I do, because I really feel God has given me that as a tool. Mm. It's not I look at that as what's opened doors for writing and for sharing. So that's kind of how I got started in all this crazy tea stuff.
And we never know of all the experiences he has allowed us to have. We have no way to know ahead of time which seemingly random piece of information he's going to build our platform on.
Yeah, who would have thought? I mean, I never would have thought. And then until I went to class, I never really thought too much about the connection with royalty or with England. It was tea. It was just kind of thing. And Florence Littauer, who is an amazing woman, who has been very influential in my life too. She's the one that said, you need to add your British heritage to what you're speaking about, and to add that in your writing and to bring that, because people here are longing for a touch of that class and that, the Camelot that we had with the Kennedys, and we haven't really had that again. So we need that little touch of the romance. And now, the story with Harry and Meghan, oh my gosh, average normal girl, became a movie star, but then marries her prince. I mean, can't get much fairy tale than that. So that's, and the Americans are lapping it up. More Americans watched that royal wedding than Brits did, so.
We've always been enthralled with them. Once we got past and separated so that we were two countries, we have always been enthralled with them.
Right.
Sharon says you are a beautiful storyteller. True. So what did you do in the tea industry for over 3 decades?
Oh, well, when I started speaking and sharing and going to different groups, people were asking me, where do I get teacups? Where do I get tea? Where do I get... And one of the things that class taught us have a product table. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't have a book, and I wasn't going to write a book because that wasn't even, in my forecast at all. But I started thinking, oh gosh, everybody's asking me, maybe I could start a little company. So I remembered a tea that I really liked when we were in England, and what my cousins would bring when they would come to visit, and it was called Whittard's tea. It took me a long time to track down the distributor in America for their tea, but I finally got it. And then it just kind of had a mind of its own. It just kind of took off. And if you're buying wholesale and all of a sudden you're seeing all these amazing things that you can buy for half the price and then turn around and sell them. So I started Penelope's Tea Time. That was, the name fit. So I started Penelope's Tea Time. It was one of the first internet tea companies. It probably was 25 years ago. And so my husband was an engineer. And so he helped me get it on, and he built me a shopping cart on my website and all that. And I did it for almost 20 years and never had a storefront. But I always did it. I did a lot of conventions where I was a vendor, and some amazing things that happened. And I found doing that if I did a workshop with the convention, didn't just have a booth, but if I did a workshop, then then it made it worthwhile, because it was quite expensive to go to some of those conventions, Christian school teachers and nurses. But if I did a kind of a workshop that was geared to them, like with teachers, I talked to the teachers about, having tea with the parents when they come in. Have just a little thing. Then you could have a cup of tea with the parents when they come in for parent-teacher conference, or have teas with the kids after school, and whatever thing that you were doing, what unit you were working on, you could do. And so now a lot of teachers do a tea after they've taught the unit on the Titanic, because that just all fits in. So I talk to a lot of teachers. A lot of teachers buy the etiquette book, and they'll do so that's another little niche with teachers that I've done. So that was kind of a fun thing. And then we moved to Tennessee. We were living in Los Angeles. We lived there for 22 years, and almost that whole time I had the tea business. And I worked as a nurse, and I tried to do some speaking and, kind of change my hats every once in a while. Then we had twin granddaughters that when we moved to Tennessee, and I just thought, I don't want to be mail order business. I didn't want to be selling and, doing all that. So I look back, and I think at the time when I first started, when the business just really took off, that sometimes I think I made a mistake, and that I really should have focused on writing at that point, because I got too busy. I couldn't, or I didn't. I would write little stories but I didn't do what I really wanted to, write a tea book. Mm-hmm. So sometimes I think that was, going the other way. But yet God says, hey, we're where we are now, so let's go forward. No regrets. Yeah. I learned a lot, made a lot of amazing friends. So I sold the business to a customer, and who lived in California. And so she changed the name to Annie's Tea Time. And it's still going. So if anybody's listening and they need tea products anywhere, that's a great resource, is anniesteatime.com. It's got a lot of good things for that. But it's been kind of a whirlwind ride, and just the writing the books, though, has opened doors I never would have expected. So that's kind of how I did the retail business.
Love that. I'm going to add Annie's Tea Time to the links. Viewers, I always have my normal protocol is to add the links to all the resources that are mentioned during the episode. I do that directly after the episode airs. So I add that link to us. And Judy Morris, is so great to meet Penelope. We have much in common. I love of people. I love of showing hospitality. She's even taught classes on that topic. And she also attended class years ago. She says, I too have held tea parties and have a lovely teacup collection. Emily Barnes influenced me with her book. If Teacups Could Talk. Oh, yeah, that's a great topic. Title. I'm enjoying hearing your stories, Penelope. Nice.
Thank you. Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in.
Yes, absolutely. So a couple of different things here. Now, you host an annual Taste of Britain tea tours. What's that all about?
Oh my gosh, that was another thing that I fit in with all that. I like to go to England because I have a lot of relatives there, and so I would go and stay with them. And they were just fascinated by how could somebody do anything with tea and do a class. I mean, they were all on board, but they were a little skeptical, kind of like my mother. How could this work? Well, I can remember speaking to a MOPS group, and a couple of the gals said, "Oh, could you take us to England with you?" And I went, "Oh, I don't know. What would you want to see?" They said, "Oh, we just want to go. We think it would be so fun." So that started another little thing. So I did about 6 years of every year. In May, I would take 12 ladies on a tea tour to England. And that was our primary focus, was seeing England. And I called it, I think, a Taste of Britain. But we started off in London. My cousin met me. And we had, some of the stories that happened were just hysterical, because I did everything by myself except the airfare. And I had a travel agent that did that, but everything else I did. And it was when not everybody, not all the places had a good websites and thing. Now it'd be probably a lot easier to do, but I had to set it all up and do the deposits. And so my first group, I can remember going, and we got to the hotel in London. My cousin met me. We got there early. And I said, and they were to set up the dinner for me for that night for all these ladies. And I said, where are we going to dinner? And they gave me this blank look, like, what do you mean? And I go, well, everything was supposed to be set up. Well, we didn't know anything about it. So I look at my cousin, and we have these, so we put on our trainers, our tennis shoes, and we started going out. And I don't know how many restaurants we went to. And we finally found an amazing restaurant that we ended up going all the time after that. We had a nice back room. They treated us wonderful. But that was like, here I had like 14, 15 people to feed, and I had no idea. Everything else was all prearranged. It worked out fine. But there were a couple little things that, I'd have paid my deposit. I remember one hotel, and when I went to make the final payment, my credit card was rejected. I don't think I have all these people in these rooms. What am I going to do? But we had a wonderful time. We always went in May during the Chelsea Flower Show. So we would go to the Chelsea Flower Show. We took the underground all through London, and sometimes we got a little lost. I got them all on the bus going the wrong way one time. But we had tea at very nice places, and also just little tea rooms. And we spent 4 days in London. Then we went to Stratford-upon-Avon and saw a Shakespeare play at the Royal Theatre there, and had tea and fish and chips, and went to, it was the first year, they did not have hardly a time to sleep. We just, I fit everything, and we were go, 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 go. And they all complained they didn't have enough time to shop. So the next year we cut out some things so they could shop. They still complained. So I thought, all they want to do is go to England and shop and spend twice as much as they can. But it was a delightful group. We just had, every group had a cheerleader. That was always, if something went wrong, she was there, to cheer us on. And we usually had one that was always late, just couldn't make the bus on time. But it was fun. And then we went to Bath. Or what I know Sharon's listening, so I have to be careful I do my pronunciations right. Had a wonderful time there. Had tea at the Pump Room, which is the amazing place. The Royal Baths. They have a pump room, and they have a beautiful tea there. So we just did some fun things. But like here, tea rooms don't always make it there, and so from year to year, I have to maybe find a new tea room because it had gone out of business. But we, the first year we had tea at the Ritz in London, and we didn't like the way we were treated. I know everybody thinks tea at the Ritz would just be wonderful, but they were I don't know, we just didn't feel like we were treated as well. So we didn't go back there. We went to some other places in London, and it was just delightful, and I'd love to do it again. I haven't done it for a few years. It'd be fun to do it again and just take everybody. And then we ended up in the Cotswolds, and we stayed in a manor house. Now we really felt like you were royalty. And we had tea in the garden, and it's fun. It was beautiful, beautiful time. So that was just another little aspect of, Penelope's tea time, a little sideline, and you just have to kind of keep moving, keep ahead of the crowd, right?
But I like the fact that you keyed in when the lady asked you that, and you took that as from the Lord and then followed it. So many of us would just say, well, no, I don't do that, and move on. Then go home and pray, Lord, why don't you open any doors for me?
Right. You have to you have to knock. And that's what I found. It's a lot of times you'll think, oh, they wouldn't be interested in my books. And then you just have to say, well, I've got to know. If I don't ask, I'll never know. And I'm surprised many times by knocking on the door saying, I have some books. I wonder if you'd be interested in having them in your store. Oh yeah, I would. So there we go. Yeah.
Judy Morrow says the England trips sound wonderful. They certainly do.
Maybe I should start them up again, right?
There you go. There you go. So another cool thing is that you are on the Titanic's speaker bureau. Now, that's crazy wonderful.
It is. It's amazing. there's amazing people that I've met there. And most of them I've met through either the Titanic Historical Society, and I belong to that. And I've met some amazing people there that have a great love for the Titanic and the people. And what I'm finding is that as I go to some of these meetings and conventions, that people never thought about the tea, that having tea, and that was a real big part of that society at that time. That was something that everybody did. Even the steerage class, they would have stop for a cup of tea and maybe a biscuit or a cookie. They wouldn't have the full-blown tea, but during that time, so the Titanic Speakers Bureau has just been some amazing people that I've met and that get to go and speak in different places.
We lost you there for a second, but you're back. You're back.
All right.
I think we heard everything that you just said. Some people are nervous about, we're going to talk about your writing now. Some people are nervous about having what they might consider a small target market. But you have turned what could be something that's that's the greatest weakness into your greatest strength by really showcasing what you do and just the illustrations you've already given us through the stories. You know what you're about. You do it well. And the people that God wants to talk to you and the people that God wants you to engage with, He orchestrates that meeting, doesn't He?
Right. He certainly does. Right. He does. He has opened so many doors and opened my eyes to just if I try to be in control, it doesn't work. I can get real pushy. I can get real set in my ways about, well, this is the way it's got to be. And I think going to writers groups and writers conferences has been a huge help, because you get ideas that other people have done. And you think, well, I wonder if that would work in my area. I talked to a lady yesterday who does poetry. And I told her I can't make 2 words rhyme. I'm not a poet at all. But I encouraged her to go to a writer's conference, just to meet other people and just to have the encouragement. And I think that's been the biggest thing for me, to meet so many wonderful people all over the world, really. From a lot in the U.S., but just meeting people and sometimes getting involved in organizations that you think, I'm not so sure that would be, and just really pray about it. And if it's not meant to be, it doesn't happen, or it just doesn't work. But I miss being with her and bouncing things back on her. She wasn't always sure how this tea thing was going to go, and especially the writing about it. I don't think she did. I didn't write a book when she was still alive. I wrote articles and I'd always send them to her. But having an encouraging friends along the way, gosh, that makes such a big difference. Not to be able to, well, here, look at me, I've made it. That's not it at all. It's just God has opened the doors in many, many areas for me. And that's been a blessing that you just can't put a price tag on that at all.
Absolutely. Let's talk about. There's so many things I want to ask you. I'm having to do them in order to make sure that I keep on track. I get distracted because I get excited about what we're talking about. So we have 3 books here today. This is Teas on the Titanic 100 Years Later. Can we just do them in order? Can we talk about them in order? I'll show all 3 of them and we'll come back to all of them. Then we have First Class Etiquette, From the Titanic to Now, Manners Matter. And lastly, The Art of the Afternoon Tea. And this is the latest one and the largest one. Let's go through them one at a time. Excuse me. Tea on the Titanic was you're so smart. You've already got all this knowledge. You got to tell me that you strategically marketed this to be published the same year as the 100th anniversary of the Titanic sinking and the Queen's Diamond Jubilee. Oh,
well, that just all kind of hit together, didn't it?
You said that so casually. That is master marketing.
Well, it wasn't really. in 2011, I was at a Titanic museum in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. I'd also seen the Titanic exhibit in Las Vegas, and looked at, and I became kind of I don't want to say a Titaniac, but I did Las Vegas. When I first started seeing some things coming out, I had that little story in the back of my mind about the Titanic, and we're having tea with my mother and all that. So that was there. And every time I'd read something, I'd kind of file it away, think, oh, here's more. But I met a lady in Los Angeles, and this is kind of how it all started. She was a milliner, a hat maker for Hallmark movies and for a lot of other movies, time frame in the 1900s, Victorian and Edwardian era. And she contacted me because I used to do some consulting too. I actually, this was a fun sideline. I consulted with a Middle Eastern private airline. The flight attendants were told that they didn't know how to serve tea properly, and they had a lot of royal from the Arabians and the Middle Eastern market, and wanted to serve tea. So they wanted, their boss told them they needed to find somebody to teach them how to do it right, and they found me on the internet. And so these two young gals, I had them over to my house, and we just started talking, what do you do? And they said, well, we have all these diplomats and presidents of companies and oil companies and all this. It was a private jet that they worked on. So we just talked to how to make a proper cup of tea, how to serve it properly, and what they should serve it, what kind of a set they should have. So we started looking around. So one of my suppliers got a beautiful tea set for them, taught them how to have tea, and I charged them for this consulting business. And I thought, well, that was kind of a fun thing to do. But in the meantime, this other lady called, and she said she had a studio and she wanted to serve tea to people when they came in, and would I help her with that? So I went down to her studio. It was in an old violin factory in downtown Los Angeles that had been converted to office space. Mm-hmm. The owner of the building was an amazing woman who was a wardrobe. She had, you would not believe the dresses and things. So she had this whole side of the building with dresses and hats because she supplied those to the movie industry. So I got to meet this darling lady, Celeste, and she and I started doing things together. We got her set up so she had a nice little tea set, and she was just delightful, and she was a Christian. So I know I did a couple things at her church, and we're still friends today. And she has an amazing, she makes custom hats. And she's won prizes. She's made hats for a lot of Hallmark movies, but she's in the Kentucky Derby Museum with hats that she's made and won prizes for that. It's her business, I think, is so I'll have to get it for you, but Celeste by Design, or I'm sorry I don't have that, but anyway, she was just fun. And so we were at, I don't know how that came about. We decided another little outlet that we were going to put on a tea, and we're going to call it The Romance of Tea and Hats. And I said, that would be a good title for a book, which we haven't done yet. But anyway, The Romance of Tea and Hats. So she had all these hats designed and she got the models, and I worked with the owner of the building. We turned the showroom, the front showroom, into a tea room just for the day. Got all these friends to come and help serve. And in the audience of that one was a lady who was I think she was the president of the Newport Beach Women's Club back, and she said, we want to do a tea, the Titanic theme. Could you help us? So we got all together and went down, and that really piqued my interest because I couldn't find any books written about the Titanic. There were very few, couple things. So I thought, put that in the back of but I wasn't going to do it because I was too busy running my business and schlepping teacups around and doing tea parties with these ladies. So that was fun. We did that, but we had to do some digging on what really happened with the Titanic. And then she made hats from that era, and it was fun. There was probably 200 or 300 women there. That of course we kept thinking, darn, we wish we had a book we could see all of these ladies, So that kind of started the another little thing with the Titanic. But in 2011, I was in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, at the Titanic attraction there. Had a couple of my grandkids and my husband as we're going through it. It's an amazing museum. If you've never been, it's amazing. And they had silver service tea sets and bone china teacups, all this, and I'm going, oh boy, Tea on the Titanic, And I said to my husband, wouldn't that be a good title for a book? And then I thought, somebody's already written it. So, but as we left, everybody has a gift shop at the end of their tours, and so does the Titanic. And they have a really nice book selection. So I looked through every book there. Not one, can you imagine, about Tea on the Titanic? The only one about food was The Last Dinner on the Titanic, which I had, and I started thinking about it. So I said to Norm, I'm going to write a book called Tea on the Titanic. Well, I don't think he had a lot of faith that I'd do it, but I think it was really a God-ordained thing, because I'm not real disciplined, and I wrote every day for 4 hours just on that book. I got it done so that it could come up the following year, and got it out. And then I went to the Titanic Museum to see if they'd like to carry it in there. And they were overboard with delight and wanting to sell it. So it's been in both their museums for 5 years, and they keep ordering. It's such a blessing. The people that the buyer for them and the owners of the museum are so supportive, and have had me come and do talks and do book signings. And that was just that just all fit in, all the tea it just came out. And and it was an amazing thing. And that book alone has just, so I don't know. So I don't know how many copies I should have had how many done, but the illustrator for that book, Elena Lively, she is an amazing girl. And I just saw her this week. I haven't seen her for probably a couple years, but she had fun doing that. And she's just had a new baby, so I was able to reconnect with her and see her new baby. So that was that book. And there's a lot of recipes in all these books, by the way, if you don't have them.
Yes. So this particular book talks about they all include stories about this Titanic, the specifics of the Titanic. And this also has stories about some famous passengers, then recipes and instructions, such as how to make the perfect pot of tea. Right. And that sounds ridiculous, but if you don't know, you need help.
Yeah, that's what my mother said. Who doesn't know how to make that? She said, that's like bringing a coffee maker to a class and showing somebody how to make it. And I said, well, Mother, there's more than that goes to it. But, when you're drinking tea all your life, you don't really think that people don't know how to make tea.
This is so in line with every Christian writer or speaker. Our giftedness is so natural to us that we don't see it as being necessary to anyone else. And that is a stumbling block for us. We need, when the Lord says, this is something I want you to talk about or write about, we need to step out in faith and explore. Maybe it'll stop quickly. Maybe it'll last the rest of our life. Just because you know everything about it doesn't mean that everyone else knows everything about it. Give him an opportunity to do a work in you and for you. Verna Sandage is here. She's giving us a thumbs up. Let me see. I thought we had another comment. Let me check really quickly, please, Penelope. And we'll talk about. Then we'll go talk about First Class Etiquette, which is an etiquette book for young children. Is it?
Right.
Let's see. Yes. Okay. This is First Class Etiquette, and you wrote it, but your granddaughter, one of the two twins, illustrated it. That sounds really fun to have a project like that with your granddaughter.
Yeah, she's an amazing girl, and that was fun. She we wanted to keep it real childlike, and so the pictures are. And so I think that right now she's thinking, oh, I wish I would have done different, but it just fit, and everything just turned out really well in that book. As far as there's a part in there that for a child to be able to do a tea by themselves, with very little instruction. Just when it comes to sharp knives and hot water, I don't want any kids to get burned or cut. So I said, this is where you get Mom to come in, but just some really simple little things. But I wasn't going to that wasn't the next book on the agenda. The next book was the third one I wrote. But I just felt like it just kept coming, and I needed to get it done. And one of my friends that lived in Los Angeles, Beverly, had been friends with for years, was writing poetry. And I always kept saying, send in, get it published. You know, you're a good writer, do it. Well, I don't know. We would go to writers groups and things when we lived in Los Angeles. She and I did. Amazing girl. And so she said to me, I have a little poem that I'd love to, if you might want to use it in your next book. And I said, oh, I'd love it. Send it to me. So she sent it to me. And I said, yes, I want to use it. I want to use it. And so when the book came out, she was so excited. I'm trying to find it. It's called Grandma and Me. And it's a darling little poem. And, you know, that came out a little before Christmas, this one book did. And a few months later, Beverly went home to be with the Lord. And it was, and I know now when I look back, that was why there was such a push to do this book, because Beverly got published, and she was able to send this sweet little book to, you know, all her relatives have it, and we signed it, and we had I know that now why that was. But then the following book then was the Downton Abbey book, and that was, when Downton Abbey first came on, and this is a lot. There's a lot of Downton Abbey in this. You can see the picture, which Carnival Productions was not real happy. They wouldn't let me use anything. They wouldn't let me use any pictures. They said, no, it's all unless you've been invited to do it. Well, I was just enamored with Downton Abbey, and as were 200 million people all over the world. But the very first episode I'm watching, and they're talking and they're reading the newspaper after it's been ironed so they could read the newspaper. Mm-hmm. Lord Grantham is sitting there, and he realizes that some of the heirs to Downton Abbey have lost their lives on the Titanic. And I'm thinking, Titanic, Downton Abbey, oh my gosh, this just fits together. Mm-hmm. I've got to do something. So I started doing that, got that rolling, got it done. And then I was able to go, it was 2 years ago, to a Victorian garden party at Highclere Castle where Downton Abbey was filmed, and presented my book to Lady Carnarvon, who is the Lord and Lady Carnarvon that live at Highclere Castle. And my cousin and I went. We spent the whole day there on the grounds. And if anybody's watching that likes Downton Abbey, oh my gosh, that was like, I said, pinch me, I can't believe I'm really here. You know, it was so fun. And we had tea there, and it was an amazing, just amazing series come to life to see how they filmed it and where they filmed it and be in the rooms. And that was a great joy.
Not everyone who speaks or writes a book has such worldwide recognized topics as Downton Abbey and the Titanic. And Christ has given you two, and then the tea is the common bond. In this one, you share, how to create your own Downton Abbey tea. History, I like that. Oh, let me get menus. Meal preparation checklist. So 2 weeks out, do this. 1 week out, do that. 4 hours before the tea begins, do these things. So helpful. Recipes again, Bible verses that are very naturally intertwined. And then also bits about history, which of course, I like everything we're talking about. For example, one tidbit that you shared was that Prince William and Princess Charlotte wore the same christening gown designed by Queen Victoria for her eldest daughter's gown. That was a tongue twister for me for some reason. That is not something that you know unless you're in the know. That's not just a random piece of information that we fall upon. But we love those tidbits.
Yeah, and I think people do, and I think, Florence Littauer was really right in sharing that part of it, and it just goes naturally, and tea, one of the first things you think about when you think about England is really tea. Well, maybe the Queen, maybe Kate, or maybe Meghan now, but actually, if you go to, we just had some friends that went to tea, and so I said, you've got to go to a place that really does it right, and where the locals in London go, not the not the Ritz and all that, Harrods and all those places, but where do the locals go? So they went and they got pictures of them, having tea, and they said they loved it. So those are the kind of things that you want it to be authentic, and you want them to be able to take the things that the royals do. What do they do? Do they sit down and have a cup of tea every afternoon? Probably yes. They don't have the full-blown afternoon tea, but it's kind of ingrained in the English spirit that tea is just part of, when I'm writing about tea, I just have got to make a cup of tea. I just can't, not drink tea. And so it's kind of, and I kind of cringe when I hear somebody say, oh, I don't like tea. And I'm like, how could you not like tea? And there's such a variety now. There's so many kinds of teas. Which there weren't. On the Titanic, you probably had black tea, you might have had jasmine tea, and Earl Grey was around then. But other than that, that was just about it. And so now we've got all these flavors of teas, and, people don't like the caffeine in tea, so there's herbal teas, but I like to explain all that because in order for something to be called tea, it actually has to have the real tea leaves in it.
Ah.
So a lot of the herbals do not have real tea in it. There will be leaves and flowers and buds and things from plants, but there's no real tea in it. So they're caffeine free because there's no tea in it. Mm-hmm. But when we think about, I think when the Brits think about tea, it's pretty much black tea. We add milk or add sugar. We don't, not too many of my cousins or anything, they don't drink anything but plain old black tea, and you put some milk in it, and that's about it. But so there's so much to know. I mean, tea is amazing, just from how it's growing, and the tea plantations are like cities within themselves. They all have tools, and family works within that industry. So I mean, that's in India. It's a huge economic boom for the country of India. So that's where a lot of the tea comes from. But it's just fascinating to me, and I guess I hope my enthusiasm shows in the writing, and that I love tea, and I love the coming together and the fellowship and being able to sit down with someone. C.S. Lewis says you can't get a cup of tea big enough or a book long enough, and I agree with. And, having a cup of tea and sitting by a fire and reading a good book, nothing's better than that. Maybe being on the beach.
Yes. Yeah. Before we move to the marketing element, I want to let you know that George Matthew Sterling Griffin is here. Hello, George. Thank you for joining us. It's good to see you. And one of the things that we are marketing as whatever our topic is, we often feel that we have to make it spread out so that everyone in the whole entire universe is interested in it, which actually weakens it tremendously. And you mentioned to me before we got on air that there are people who are in either one of the camps. They're very interested in what you have to say and what you talk and write about, or they're not interested at all. But that's not a bad thing, is it?
No, it's nice to have someone, like I was telling you, it's nice to have someone when they like the Titanic or they like Downton Abbey and they also like tea. Mm-hmm. Then that's pretty much my target market. Those are the people that not necessarily haven't liked tea before, but they like the stories that go with it, or they like the historical compound of it, that it's been around for over 2,000 years. And it's the second, and I always say this wrong, water is the most popular drink worldwide. That's the number one seller. Number one thing that people drink is water. Second is tea, worldwide.
Wow.
Yeah, and so I'm thinking, my gosh, with that many people, I ought to have a lot of people that want to read about tea. However, a lot of people just like to drink it and don't really give a rip about where it was growing or how to make it or anything. And so there is, when you look at it that way, there's a huge market, but not everyone is interested in what I have to write up about tea.
But you write it and speak it, communicate it in various ways so clearly that they can find you in the crowd. And that's one of the elemental marketing foundations. I mean, we've got to have that. So we don't want to be generic. We want to be specific, and that actually helps us, and it definitely helps our audience find us. All right, so tell me how you market. You combine other people's, other organizations and ministries and so forth, how you connect that, your abilities and your giftedness, your speaking, your tea supplies, your books, to these other events.
Well, one of the things that I've done is I will look for when there's going to be a Titanic event or a Titanic, like the dresses from the movie.
Uh-huh.
They might be showing somewhere. And people know now what I do. So a lot of times people will call me or send me an email and say, did you know this was happening? Or did you know that was happening?
Nice.
And so I will contact the museum or the event or the venue wherever it's going to be presented. And if I can, I'll go. If not, I'll just say, these are my books. Would you be interested in having them during your exhibit? And that's worked many places, a lot of places that's worked over the years. The other thing I do on Facebook is there's a lot of tea groups on Facebook. You know how there's groups for everything. There's a lot of Titanic groups. Now, some of them are very specific that they don't want this to be a selling place. Mm-hmm. One tea group once a month you can advertise.
Right.
But I will just put a little plug in, or I will look at who is opening a tea room. And one of my best customers, I have not been there yet, but I've heard that it's an amazing place to have tea, is called Polly Claire's in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And she and I started, when she was just in the thought process of opening her tea establishment, I contacted her and we started talking, and now she's a fabulous customer. And she told me last time that I'm the only books that she sells. And I just when I lived in Tennessee, I worked as a nurse there too. And so two of my friends were just gaga about tea. So they've been really good, but they sent me a Facebook picture of them just a couple weeks ago. We're at Polly Claire's. Look what we saw. We saw your books here. We're so excited. So that was fun. That was nice that they're, I know they go to tea every month. They know every tea place in the South to go to. So that's one way that I kind of connected with, try to connect with the tea room owners. And it takes a long time. You've got to, wait and build a little relationship with them before, and let them know that you're honest. And, and I don't have them pay me before. So I hope that that's established, and I've never had anybody not pay me. Mm-hmm. They've always, send them the books. And I had a huge mistake, though, once. I did not insure it. And the whole books, everything, I think because they're so heavy and they get thrown. And evidently the box came open and the books went just everywhere. And so I lost that big shipment of books. So I always insure now to make sure, that we don't. But I have established, I think, rapport with the bookstore, either bookstores or tea room owners, that, I extend them that courtesy of, they get the books and they send, and I've never had anybody stiff me. So they're good. And then I will go to museums. And what I found lately is a lot of museums are using a central buyer, and that's been a little harder to break through that, because they've got one buyer that's buying for the whole museum, and it's not necessarily somebody connected with their museum. So that's a big market right now that I'm having a little trouble, not doing as well as the one-on-one with places. Mm-hmm. But let's see, what other questions you want to ask? My mind went blank.
That's okay. That's okay. You had mentioned earlier that we're talking about, as you mentioned just a second ago, developing relationships. And then following up someone who has or has not ordered, so that we can have repeat customers.
Right. You really need to follow up. It's amazing, because sometimes, like a small museum will have one person that's in charge of all these things. And maybe she has 200 different companies that she orders from, because there are specific things for that specific museum. So you have to follow up, because they just don't always And usually they'll say, oh, yes, so I have a timeline that 2 or 3 months, I'll follow up. And a lot of times they'll say, no, we're still okay. Contact me in a month. So I'll do that. It's I guess there's a little saying I heard, the harder you work, the luckier you get.
Yes.
So it's not going to just happen automatically. You've got to be out there promoting, and you're selling. The marketing part, I didn't know that was going to be, that maybe I wouldn't have written a book if I knew I had to do all that. But you do, and I know I've met some amazing people doing that. There was one other thing I was going to say, but I can't remember what it was either. But the follow-up is really important once you've established it. And then I think sometimes, like, I got a letter from a friend or an email from a friend saying, hey, did you know the Biltmore Mansion was having a Titanic exhibit? And I didn't. I'm not there, so I didn't know it. So I contacted them. It took me a couple tries, but they ordered 3 cases of the books, and it was there during the whole thing. Now, I don't know if there will be a repeat customer because the exhibit is gone.
Uh-huh.
They haven't asked, they bought the books. And now that's one other thing that I found out. I do not do consignment on books. If you go to a small tea room, they'll say, well, I'll take them on consignment. And I did that in the beginning, but it doesn't work because they don't have much of an investment in them. And if something happens to the book, I'm the one that loses. So I say, no, I don't do consignments. I just sell direct. And they can start off with a little bit, and I'll follow up and see how they do if they want to reorder. The other thing I do is every book, I don't know if I did yours, but every book that goes out of my home that I sell has an autograph sticker, and I autograph a copy.
Oh.
And so I think that helps with the sales. They expect that now. All the customers that I have, they want that little sticker, and they want it signed inside. And then I have an opportunity to do a book signing too. So if I go, then and that's fun to do the book signings. You have to travel. Sometimes you don't sell a lot, but you just have to go, and book signings you do one-on-one with people, and that person is probably your best advertiser because she or he has met you. Mm-hmm. And they say, oh, I met her, and I'll get a lot of that on Amazon on the reviews. They say I met the author, and so that I think is a good connection with your reader. You want to stay connected with your reader. And the one thing that I'm not really good on is newsletters or blogging. I'm really slow on that. And I think that would really help my business a lot because that does keep you in contact with them. Mm-hmm. So that's something that I need to sharpen up on, and
we all have a list of things we need to sharpen up on. Everybody, from beginner to well established. Let's see. Judy says, love Downtown Abbey. I just put both of your tea books on her wish. She just put both of your tea books on her wish list for Amazon. That's exactly the way it's supposed to work. They look wonderful, and she hopes that she gets them for Christmas. Excuse me. And Sharon says, yes, it needs tea to make it tea. Preach it, sister.
Well, there's well, I won't go into that, but the Downton Abbey part of it has really been exciting because I've met so many people that just absolutely love it. I mean, they're just, so the Downton Abbey groups on Facebook too are another way to promote this book. There's a lot of different ways. And, I think Facebook has been an amazing marketing tool for me. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it'll keep up, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. And I guess the new thing now is Pinterest. I know all the young girls are on Pinterest. All my granddaughters are. So I'm trying to get up to speed on that and get things out on that, because that could be also another way to get the word out about the book and have direct links to Amazon. And so.
Mm-mm-mm. All right. Well, I think we've covered everything. There's more we could talk about for sure, but I think that we've covered everything that we needed to today. It was a joy to have you. Everything that you're talking about, even your personal experiences, are very interesting to me on a personal level as well as business. The marketing elements that you're talking about there are a lot of people who do some of those things, but you do more of them together cumulatively to create a marketing strategy than a lot of the people that I know. Most people do one or two, but they don't link them together like you do.
Yeah, I guess I thought people would just, well, once I put them up on Amazon, and boy, they just come running and just want to buy my book, and that isn't the way it works. You got to always keep books in your car too. If you're I don't care what you've read, keep books in your car, because if somebody, oh, I'm a writer, what do you write? And I'll have to look. Oh, well, I happen to have one right here. So sometimes that might be a little bit in your face marketing, but you've got it, and you're able to supply them. They say they're interested. And there was one other thing that I wanted to say to you. Always listen for new opportunities. How vague it may be, but always kind of, if you hear something, either write it down and then follow through with it. And then the other thing is listen to customers. What are they wanting? What kind of questions do they ask you? And so that's two things that I try to do that, so that when I'm writing, I'm thinking, okay, this lady, I want to write to her about this thing. What is she asking about? So that I have somebody specific when I'm writing the book. And I have to say that I try to write about other things, but it always comes back to where tea is involved, an integral part of it. Because that is what God has given me, and that's the gift that He's given me, to take that and to use it for His glory. So that is my prayer, that all these things will work together for good, and that it will be a blessing to somebody.
I'm confident that it is. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a wonder. I've enjoyed every story that you had to say, and I know that there's lots and lots and lots more there. So maybe you need to have a one-man show sometime, a one-woman show, and tell your stories.
I don't know. Yeah, after a while, you think people probably get sick of hearing that, and where you're. But I think God always interjects something into it, so that I think it does become kind of a fun thing, and not just a me. Here I am. Listen to me. You don't want it to be like that. So, but it's good. Well, it's been great to be with you. Thank you so much.
You are very welcome, and it's fun to have everybody with us. Viewers, we always appreciate you being here. I know you can't do it every day like we do, but it's wonderful when you're here. And this is a particularly unique program today. Very enjoyable to me, and I know that it has been to you as well. This has been Marketers on a Mission, episode number 189, How to Grow Your Audience and Sell More Books by Attending Large Events. And whether you're attending them or sending books there, to somehow tie into large events that coordinate and with your topic, your book's topic. And my guest has been Penelope Carlevato. Tomorrow, speaker, writer, and professional counselor, Dee Lundgren. She's going to join me tomorrow. She's been with us before, and she's just a treasure. She's going to help us recognize and respond to triggers designed to derail us when we're vulnerable during the holidays at happy family gatherings. We're here every weekday to serve you at 12 Pacific, 3 Eastern. This program is designed to help you learn the craft of professional writing and speaking from those who already do it. Because our mission is online. We have to market to get to our mission. We have to serve our audience through marketing so that they even know we have a product, somehow that we can answer a question, or we can serve them in some way that God has shown us truths and insights and stories that are valuable, and they're hungry for them. But if we don't connect with them through marketing and being online, then they'll miss those opportunities to be served. We will. No. That's not what we want. Thank you again, Miss Penelope. Until tomorrow, appreciate you being here.